Hello everyone, this is Showtime 112. The relationship between Israel and its Arab neighbors from the late 1940s to the early 1970s can almost be viewed as one long war, with alternating periods of high-intensity conflict and low to medium-intensity fighting. Between the two most famous large-scale wars was a somewhat less intense but prolonged and static conflict known as the War of Attrition. Broadly defined, it covered the period beginning immediately after the Six-Day War of 1967 and ending with the ceasefire agreement of August 1970. More narrowly, it began with the increase in hostilities along the southern Sinai front in March 1969. The period after August 1970 was anything but peaceful, but attention shifted northward. Although it was largely a static war with no attempt to achieve permanent territorial gains, there was still significant ground activity, mostly artillery bombardments and commando raids, along with guerrilla infiltrations in the east and the north. Most interestingly for us, the conflict featured frequent aerial engagements, including air-to-air combat and suppression of enemy air defenses. In its final phase, it even saw the direct intervention of a superpower. Israel's victory in 1967 resulted in a major territorial expansion, capturing the Golan Heights, West Bank, Sinai Peninsula, and Gaza Strip. The most powerful Arab nation, Egypt, suffered the greatest losses in both territory and military equipment. It's estimated that Egyptian forces lost over 9,800 personnel dead or missing, and up to 85% of their military hardware, much of which was captured intact. The ceasefire line along the Suez Canal was initially defended by minimal forces. At that time, the Egyptian Air Force, officially known as the United Arab Republic Air Force, lost only 4% of its personnel, but an astounding 90% of its combat capability, including 72% of its fighters and all of its bombers. Of its 15 main air bases, Egypt lost 4 in Sinai and 2 more along the Suez Canal had to be abandoned. The air defense network also suffered losses. 2 S-75 SAM sites, known in the West as SA-2 Guideline, were destroyed in Sinai. At least 2 were bombed, and the rest had to be withdrawn beyond the range of Israeli artillery. The Syrian Arab Air Force suffered significantly fewer losses, estimated at around a quarter of its aircraft fleet. Jordan, on the other hand, encountered the heaviest relative losses. Nearly all of its combat aircraft and about 80% of its armor were destroyed. On the positive side, the Soviet Union quickly replaced most of the Arab losses, prioritizing Egypt and providing new systems, many free of charge or on favorable financial terms. Deliveries began as early as June 12, 1967, and by year's end, roughly 70% of Egypt's pre-war strength had been restored. The Egyptian Air Force received 65 MiG-21s, 123 MiG-17s, 10 Sukhoi Su-7s, 18 Tu-16 bombers, and 10 Mi-8 helicopters, a type Egypt had not previously operated. The number of Soviet advisors also greatly increased. Even so, Moscow remained somewhat cautious, refusing to supply enough equipment for Egypt to mount a major offensive. The Soviets doubted the Arab forces' ability to effectively use advanced weapons, and limited their shipments of spare parts, external fuel tanks and bombs, fearing another Arab defeat would tarnish the reputation of Soviet arms. Syria's losses were replaced as well, though Soviet support was less extensive, reflecting frustrations with the Syrians' cooperation. Jordan rebuilt a single Hunter squadron, and from mid-1969 onward, the United States supplied F-104 starfighters. Both aircraft types, however, were kept well away from Israel and avoided combat with Israeli Air Force. The primary Arab fighter was the MiG-21, supplied in several variants. The oldest, the MiG-21 F-13, used only a radar gun sight and carried 2 R-3S air-to-air missiles plus a 30mm cannon. a powerful weapon but with only 60 rounds, enough for about 4 seconds of firing. The aircraft also had poor rearward visibility and extremely short endurance. Later variants, such as the MiG-21 PFS and FL, omitted guns entirely, had higher fuel consumption, and were heavier, reducing maneuverability. Many missions ended with dangerously low fuel reserves. In early 1969, the Soviets delivered the MiG-21 PFM, which reintroduced the gun. This was followed by the MiG-21 MF, equipped with 4 missile hardpoints and the ability to carry up to 3 drop tanks. Still, the MiG's radar was of limited value in this theater. Ground-controlled interception, GCI, remained essential, and the aircraft was vulnerable to damage, often catching fire or exploding after only a few cannon hits. Arab air forces also employed large numbers of fighter bombers that were inferior to the Western aircraft operated by Israel. These included the MiG-17F and the Sukhoi Su-7, both originally designed as fighters. The subsonic MiG-17 typically carried 2 100-kilogram bombs and 2 rocket pods for attack missions, relying on its powerful guns and maneuverability for defense. The supersonic Su-7 BMK was faster and had better acceleration, but its maneuverability was poor. Its payload, however, was considerably heavier. It could carry 4 500-kilogram or 6 250-kilogram bombs or various rocket pods. Like their Soviet fighter counterparts, these aircraft suffered from extremely short range. Operating from bases in the Nile Delta, they could barely reach Western Sinai, delivering light bomb loads with medium accuracy. Missions flown at low altitude often had to be aborted if the target wasn't quickly located after a pop-up maneuver. Israel's Air Force had performed remarkably during the Six-Day War, but paid a heavy price, which is often overlooked. 46 combat aircraft and 25 aircrew were lost, about 23% of its fighter bombers, and 9% of its combat pilots. This was a significant blow for an air force of its size. To complicate matters, France, previously Israel's main arms supplier, imposed an embargo under President de Gaulle. The embargo wasn't enforced 100%, as certain French ministries and industry quietly kept supporting the Israelis. Spare parts continued to be supplied, although at a reduced rate. Some equipment was delivered through third parties, and several airframes were still delivered, such as 3 Vautour bombers, 7 Super Frelon, and 7 Alouette helicopters. France's place was soon taken by the United States as Israel's principal weapons supplier. Orders for A4 Skyhawks had been made as early as 1966, though deliveries were delayed by the war. The initial request for F4 Phantoms was denied. After the Six-Day War, however, the US lifted the embargo in late October, likely encouraged by the massive Soviet resupply efforts to Egypt and Syria. Israel's original order called for 48 A4H Skyhawks. This variant lacked certain features such as advanced targeting systems and a radar warning receiver, while air-to-air missile capability was intentionally omitted at Israel's request. Despite these limitations, the Skyhawk was rugged, simple, and affordable, with twice the weapon load and endurance of the Mirage. Deliveries began in December 1967, continued through 1968, and equipped 2 squadrons. The first combat mission was flown on February 15, 1968. Another 52 Skyhawks were ordered, with deliveries starting in March 1969. Uncertain about US willingness to continue arms deliveries and facing serious budget constraints, Israel worked hard to maintain and modernize its remaining French aircraft. The Super Mystères, the first supersonic fighter in Israeli service and roughly comparable to the F-100 Super Sabre, underwent a major upgrade. Its original Snecma Atar afterburning engine was replaced with the Pratt & Whitney J52, the same engine used in the A4H Skyhawk. Although this engine lacked an afterburner, it was lighter, 25% more powerful, and both more reliable and fuel efficient. The upgraded aircraft, renamed Sa'ar by the Israelis, also received modern avionics and air-to-air missile capability. Operated by a single squadron in the ground attack role, deliveries of the improved version began in December 1969. A slightly larger quantity of older Mystère 4A fighters, 26 aircraft surviving from the Six-Day War, did not undergo major modifications and were instead used as fighter bombers on the less intense Eastern Front, once sufficient American aircraft became available. The even older Dassault Wagan also remained in service, with 41 airframes still operational after 1967. The straight-wing jet was similarly used for ground attack missions in the East and later as an advanced trainer. 61 Mirage III CJs continued to serve as Israel's frontline fighters. Known as Skyhawk in Israeli service, the Mirage underwent multiple post-war upgrades. Its radar was of limited use and often replaced with ballast, but the aircraft remained Israel's main air superiority platform, even after the arrival of the F-4 Phantom. Despite the United States initially rejecting Israel's request for Phantoms, persistence paid off. In October 1968, Washington agreed to supply the aircraft, with deliveries beginning just under a year later. The F-4E Phantom represented a major leap forward for the Israeli Air Force, but also came at a high price. For comparison, each A4 Skyhawk cost just under $1 billion, while a single F-4 cost about $4.5 million. The Phantom also required a second crew member, a weapons systems officer referred to by Israelis as a navigator. Since few Israeli aircraft had operated with two crew members before, some pilots were cross-trained to fill these positions temporarily. The Phantom's avionics were far more complex than anything Israel had used before, and American technicians initially assisted in maintenance and instruction. The first aircraft arrived in September 1969, and the first combat sortie was flown on October 9. Deliveries continued at a rate of 4 aircraft per month, and in November 1969 a second Phantom squadron was formed. Although the Phantom was superior to the Mirage III in almost every air-to-air aspect, it had a much more powerful radar, a second crewman, and could carry 4 times as many missiles, including beyond visual range Sparrows. It was primarily used in the air-to-ground role, where it was even more dominant. Consequently, Mirage pilots ended up scoring more aerial victories than their Phantom counterparts. One key advantage of Israeli pilots in air combat lay in their guns and missiles. Many Arab MiG-21s lacked internal guns altogether, while early F-13s carried 30mm cannon, but only enough ammunition for 4 seconds of fire, compared to 7 seconds for the Mirage's Defa cannons of the same caliber. The Phantom's Vulcan cannon offered a higher rate of fire with sufficient ammunition for 6 seconds of continuous shooting. Israel's first domestically designed air-to-air missile, the Shafrir I, was used in 1967 with disappointing results. Its improved successor, the Shafrir II with a 12-kilogram warhead, entered service in July 1969 and proved effective. Israel also acquired AIM-9B sidewinders from the United States. The more capable AIM-9D variant arrived with the Phantoms and was fitted to the Mirage IIIs by July 1970. Whereas guns had scored nearly all Israeli air kills in 1967, by the end of the War of Attrition, missiles accounted for the majority of victories. Arab air forces relied solely on the Soviet R-3S, a reverse-engineered AIM-9B. The missile proved unreliable, easily distracted by heat reflections from desert sand, and could be fired only under low G loads, up to 2.5 G, and against targets pulling no more than 3 G. Besides technical advantages, Israeli pilots enjoyed being able to practice dogfighting against aircraft their enemies were flying. One MiG-21 F-13 and two MiG-17s were acquired by the Israelis. The MiG-21 thanks to a defection, and the 17s thanks to the mistaken landing on an Israeli airstrip by two Syrian pilots. What then was the motivation behind the War of Attrition? The Arab states, particularly Egypt led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who had already suffered two humiliating defeats at Israel's hands, were eager for revenge after the 1967 debacle. They believed the only path to regaining lost territory was through another war. However, lacking offensive capability at the time, they sought instead to make Israel's occupation unbearably costly by inflicting casualties and forcing constant mobilization of Israeli reserves, thereby straining Israel's economy. On the Suez front, Israel quickly began constructing a chain of fortifications known as the Bar Lev Line along the canal's eastern bank. Since Egypt had no meaningful amphibious or bridging capability, the line could be defended with a relatively small force. Israel, for its part, was determined to hold onto the captured territories, which provided valuable strategic depth and bargaining power. Having been forced to abandon the Sinai Peninsula a decade earlier under weak security guarantees, Israel now intended to trade land only for tangible and reliable concessions. Both sides conducted commando raids and sustained artillery exchanges. However, Israel possessed little towed artillery and therefore relied heavily on air power for retaliation. This soon expanded into deep penetration airstrikes that Egyptian interceptors could not effectively oppose. To counter these attacks, Egypt sought to strengthen its air defenses, particularly its SAM network. Even that proved insufficient, eventually prompting the Soviet Union to intervene directly, deploying its own SAM batteries and interceptor units to fight alongside Egypt. All of this will be discussed in future episodes. As always, you are welcome to comment, but this time, comments will be limited to channel subscribers. Please refrain from expressing political opinions or drawing parallels with current events. Hate speech will not be tolerated. If you wish to dispute information in the video, and I'm sure some of you will, please reference specific sources. Thank you for your understanding and keep watching Showtime 112.